Hello. This morning's Gospel is perhaps not as familiar as some, so it's quite short, and if you bear with me, I'll read it to you. It's from John chapter 1, starting at verse 43. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, the son of Joseph, from Nazareth." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." When Jesus saw Nathanael coming towards him, he said of him, "Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael asked him, "Where did you come to know me?" Jesus answered, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." Nathanael replied, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered, "Do you believe because I saw it? Do you believe because I said that I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Very truly I tell you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." Here ends the reading. It seems to me that any reading which begins the next day expects us to know our Bibles and to have a clear idea of what's going on. So the first question I asked myself about this morning's Gospel was, the first day after what? Well, if you take Jesus' baptism as being day one, then day two is when the Baptist proclaims Jesus as the Lamb of God, and two of his own disciples immediately leave and follow Jesus, who invites them to come and see. One of those disciples was Andrew, who then went to find his brother Simon, saying, "We have found the Messiah." When Andrew brought Simon to Jesus, Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You are to be called Cephas," which is translated Peter. It is on day 3 that Jesus meets Philip and invites him, "Follow me." Philip, as we heard, is from the same place as Andrew and Simon, so there may have been some prior connection there. Perhaps Andrew told him about Jesus too. Philip then finds Nathanael, and also says, albeit in a rather more long-winded way, "We have found the Messiah." What I like about Nathanael is that, unlike Andrew, Simon and Philip, he's not immediately impressed by this. In fact, he says, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" And perhaps you can see his point. There have been a lot of false messiahs, and Nazareth at that stage was a very small rural community of perhaps no more than 500 people. It wasn't the kind of place you'd expect anything interesting to happen, and one writer said that calling someone a Nazarene was tantamount to an insult. It certainly wasn't the first place you would think of as the home of the Messiah, and the spin doctors or PR people of the day would probably have advised any prophet who wanted to be taken seriously to think twice before adopting Nazareth as part of his name. Now we know, of course, God doesn't generally do what seems obvious to us, but that was a lesson Nathanael had yet to learn. And I love that Philip doesn't argue the point. He just says, "Come and see." And Jesus isn't offended by Nathanael's cynicism either. As with Simon, when he looked into his heart and saw the potential for Simon to become Peter, he looked into Nathanael's heart and saw truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. These brief verses tell us a lot about the way our relationship with God should be, which is, at the most basic, one of complete honesty And they show us also how to share our faith with others. Give people a chance to come and see for themselves, and God will do the rest. But to go back to my timeline for a moment, the first 14 verses of John's Gospel are the ones we hear every Christmas. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. You know the rest. But then we move from a mysterious world beyond time and space to something much more mundane and easy to keep track of. Day 1, Day 2, Day 3, and so on. This suggests that the Word has moved out from mystery, from the beginning, into a very specific context. This time, this place, this is what it means for the Word to become flesh and live among us. Also, if we follow John's Gospel into chapter 2, that begins on the 3rd day. There was a wedding at Cana. And so, if my maths is right, we are on day 6. And having been reading the early chapters of Genesis for morning prayer this week, I went back to look at what God did on the 6th day of creation. He was busy. The earth brought forth living creatures of every kind. God made humankind in his image and blessed them and gave them dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over the cattle and over all the wild animals of the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. And God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. And now, on this 6th day, we find God made in man's image in order to bless us still further. God, forsaking the dominion he could have had over us, to live as one of us, subject to human rule so that we might return to the relationship that was intended on that 6th day of creation, showing us who God is, but not forcing himself upon us. There will be more about the wedding at Cana and the miraculous changing of water into wine in next week's sermons. But for now, I just thought the similarity of the days was worth exploring a little. During Epiphany, we also explore the ways in which God shows us who he is, through the visit of the wise men, which makes him known to the whole world. That miracle at Cana, the presentation in the temple, and usually his baptism in the Jordan. These have become what you might call the big set-piece events in our liturgy. But this year, with the story of Philip and Nathanael, we have the chance to think about an epiphany which is really much more like the way God makes himself known to us, often by a friend or a family member saying, I found something, someone I want to share with you. Come and see. Now, we might be like Andrew and follow straight away, or we might be more like Nathanael and take some convincing. I don't think it matters. There is room for all of us in God's kingdom. We don't know much about Nathanael, which gives writers lots of scope for the I wonder questions. What was his background? Was he a natural cynic? Was he a seeker, but yet to be convinced? Or a good and observant Jew who felt secure in his faith and didn't really need the teachings of some new rabbi? Thank you very much. Or was he included as an example of those who had a chance to follow Jesus and turned away? We will come across many of those, particularly in John's Gospel, which has been abused down the centuries by those who seek to use it to justify anti-Semitism. But whoever and whatever he was, Nathanael was changed by meeting Jesus, by the realization that here was someone who knew him, who got him, we might say today, in a way that most of us can only dream of. Someone whose understanding echoed the words of the Psalms. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in, behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Like Andrew and Peter, Nathanael came, saw, and stayed. We know that because John mentions him again in chapter 21, after the resurrection, when the disciples were gathered by the Sea of Tiberias. He was part of the group that shared breakfast with Jesus by a charcoal fire. He heard the exchange with Peter that reversed and forgave the threefold betrayal in the courtyard of the high priest. His story shows us that if we open our hearts and minds to God, wonderful things can happen. We are only a month away from Lent. Instead of giving up chocolate this year, why not try exploring faith and see where that takes you? The Diocesan Lent course is called, appropriately enough, Come and See, and we're offering it in the benefice throughout Lent. I'll look forward to having your company on the journey.